All right, hello everybody, and I'm glad that you're back. Since you guys were in class today, you guys have a bell work that you can work on real quick. Add that to your bell worksheet. Take a moment, see if you can come up with an answer. Okay, if you had a chance to pause and check your answer, hopefully you filled in the 25 in place of the C for Celsius. And if you did, then that means you probably were able to get an answer of 77. So if you have that, congratulations, you did good. Also, if you have the assignment, those should be the correct answers for the ones that you had for 7.5. Be sure that the work is there to go along with it. And then to the notes for 7.6. These were basically using the same units that you guys had for the imperial and also the metric system. So today's was basically making sure that you can convert into a rate, make sure that you can use a unit rate, which is defined by the rate as a denominator of 1. So for example, you have here, you're going to drive a car 300 miles on a tank of 15 gallons. You want to express that as a rate, and usually we use this in miles per gallon. So you would put the 300 miles on top is your numerator and 15 gallons in the bottom is your denominator. So that is the rate. However, if you want a unit rate, we want to make sure that you can get a 1 on the bottom. So luckily 315 divides evenly, and you do get 20 to 1. So 20 miles to 1 gallon, which we don't normally write the 1 on the bottom. We go ahead and just write the 20 then. And if you do that, it looks like this. It's 20 with the miles on top and gallons on the bottom. So if you read that, it looks like 20 and then as a fraction with just labels, which is kind of weird. So we don't necessarily write it that way, but we do say it this way. We say 20 miles per gallon. So this division sign becomes the word per. So if you remember that, that'll help you set up some of these for the next example. Also, if you wanted to, you could put the refraction in the opposite direction. You can go ahead and put 15 gallons on top and 300 miles on the bottom. If you do and reduce, it's still 20 and 1, but this time the 1's on top and the 20's on the bottom. So you cannot have a unit rate unless you have a 1 on the bottom. So the solution then becomes, instead of saying 1/20th of a gallon per mile, go ahead and do the division with your calculator and get a decimal. So if that's the case, you actually end up with 0.05 gallons. That's the 1/20th as a decimal, and then we say 1.05 gallons over 1 mile, which realistically is just 0.05 gallons per mile. Hopefully that clears up the unit rate. Take a look at these two. Notice that there is the same two numbers. They gave you 6 pounds, they gave you $5.29. So for the 6 pounds and $5.29, how you put them together depends on the unit rate that they want. So if you see down below, it says dollars per pound, and the one below that says pounds per dollar. Depending on which one is first, that tells you where to put the numerator, and after the word per, that tells you which one's the denominator. So on dollars per pound, I have the 5.29 on top and the 6 on the bottom. And again, we want a unit rate. So if you just made the rate with this fraction, we divide those two numbers and we get $0.88 per 1 pound. So we just say dollar, it's a 0.88 or 88 cents per pound. Flip it around and you end up with 6 on top and 5.29 on the bottom. And again, this is the rate they want. They want to put pounds over dollars or pounds per dollar. So if you divide, this one ends up being 1.13. Since 6 is bigger than 5.29, that makes sense. So you get 1.13 pounds per dollar. And both of these are useful in different situations. The top one, if you know how many pounds you're buying of something, fruit, meat, whatever, you can multiply the 0.88 and get your dollar amount. And if you have so many dollars, you can figure out how many pounds you would be able to buy if you know the other rate. So Just kind of depends on how you look at it. Moving on to the next example. See if you can set this one up with the correct number on top. You can pause for a second if you want. Good. So if you had 320 feet over 30 seconds, that's the correct way to set that one up, since they said express it as feet per second. And 32 feet on top does reduce to 3 seconds on the bottom. If you just put that in the calculator with your ABC button, it'll reduce it to 32 over 3, except remember, this is not a unit rate until you divide these out and you get a 1 on the bottom. So if I divide 32 and 3, you'll get 10.67. And the 10.67 is the number of feet for every 1 second. So this actually works out to 10.67 feet per second. Occasionally, you'll get some examples that ask you to solve for a missing variable. And if I give you a rate, like the one in example 2, it says how far you're going to be able to drive is 326 miles on a tank of 30 gallons. Letter A is asking you how far can you get or drive with 25 gallons. So you could do a rate with miles on top and gallons on the bottom, and then find your unit rate and multiply that with the 25. Or you can set this up as a proportion, which is what I chose to do. So as you can see, 326 miles over 30 gallons, that's from the information they gave you above. And if you did miles over gallons or gallons over miles, it really doesn't matter as long as you're consistent and you set up the next fraction the same way. Excuse me. So since we have 25 gallons, I put that number on the bottom. The miles we don't know, so that's going to be your X on top, because the other fraction has miles over gallons. And now you can just cross multiply and solve it out as a proportion. So if you do that, now I have 8,150 equals 30x. And since we can divide 30 to both sides, we'll get x equals 271.67 miles. Example B is kind of asking the opposite question. Well, what if I know the miles, how many gallons? So again, you can set up the same ratio. You have the 326 miles and the 30 gallons, but this time, put in the miles they gave you and find your gallons. So since they gave me 430 miles, I can put that one on top. That matches the 326 on top in miles, and put X on the bottom for your gallons, and then cross multiply here. And those ones end up being larger numbers, so I got 12,900 equals the 326x, and again, divide the 326 to get x by itself. So here's my answer. I get 39.57 gallons with 430 miles. All right, hopefully this is pretty simple and you guys remember doing proportions. This should be easy enough to do. The bottom example is a little tougher only because they want you to do some conversions, but they also want you to calculate a question afterwards. So the first part is converting miles per hour, and they want you to basically make this feet per second, since they're going to give me how many feet will a car travel in 6 seconds. The car traveling at 47 miles per hour. So start with the 47 miles per hour. So remember, it's per 1 hour. That's why there's a 1 on the bottom. And we know from the conversion at the top that every mile equals 5,280 feet. So we're going to use that and multiply these two together. So that should give us a top number of 248,160 feet. And remember, this is for every 1 hour, since these miles are going to cancel down here. Miles with miles. Okay. Next is to convert the hours into seconds. We don't have that straight conversion from the last unit, but we do, or the last section, but we do have hours and minutes and seconds. So we could do this instead. Start with your hours. And the hours cancel out since every 1 hour equals 60 minutes. And since every 1 minute equals 60 seconds, we can cancel minutes with minutes. And what's left over is going to be seconds on the bottom and feet on top. And if you remember from the last section, we did have 1 hour equals 3,600 seconds. So that's makes sense. If you look at the bottom number, that's what we have is the 3,600. Okay. Once I know that, then we can divide these two out to get our unit rate of feet per second. And normally I would stop here, except our question didn't ask us to convert feet to second. They asked us to find out how many feet the car will travel in 6 seconds. So if it's 68.93 feet for every 1 second, let's just multiply times 6, and then that'll give us our distance for the car. As you can see, the 413.58 is the number of feet that we get. All right, down below is one more example. I think this is just to kind of see if you were paying attention to where the units go, because they told you Alfonso checks his pulse for 5 minutes and counts 700 or 570 beats. What's the heart rate in beats per minute? So if you were seeing it, I'll point it out real quickly. They gave you 5 first, and they gave you the 570 as beats, but remember that they want beats per minute. So if the first label's beats, make sure you put that one on top and minutes on the bottom. Otherwise, you might make the mistake of doing 5 over 570. Okay, don't forget to reduce. And since if you divisible by 5, it does end up being 114 beats for every 1 minute. So we just say 114 beats per minute. All right, last one. This one's similar to the one up top. It just has kilometers and hours instead of miles per hour. And they also want you to calculate how many meters that the person travels in 5 seconds. So just take a moment and see if you can come up with your answer. I'll have you pause it, and then you can check it. Okay, if you're back, hopefully you did 1,000 meters for every kilometer, 1 kilometer. So that way you have kilometers canceling here. If that's the case, you end up with 80,000 meters per hour. And once again, you can do the hours to minutes, minutes to seconds conversion, which is what we did up top. So hours cancels hours, minutes with minutes. And you can see that the rate would then be 80,000 meters for every 3,600 seconds. The unit rate being 2.22 meters for every 1 second. And since this is for every 1 second, and we want to know how far the car traveled in 5, we just multiply times 5. All right, so that should bring us to our final answer, which is 111.11 meters for this particular car. And hopefully that helps. So if you guys need to, you can always rewatch the video or back it up to where you need it. And the assignment is going to be 7-6. And just know that there is a quiz on Tuesday. That quiz is covering everything for 7-4 through 7-6. All right, guys, have a great one, and I will see you in class.